I'm James Mitchell. I'm 26 years old, and my parents tried to steal my inheritance to give to my brother while I was dying of cancer. It sounds like the plot of a low-budget movie, I know. But this was my life. Before I tell you how I meticulously dismantled their world and turned their twisted dream into an absolute nightmare, do me a favor and let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always incredible to see how far these stories can reach, connecting strangers from all over the world. It all started on what should have been an unremarkable Tuesday. For me, these days were marked by the steady, rhythmic beeping of an Ry4 drip, a sound that had become the soundtrack to my life. The air in my hospital room was thick with the sterile, chemical smell that clings to everything in a chemo ward, a constant reminder of the poison being pumped into my veins to save me. It was my third round, and my body felt like a battery drained completely to zero. My mind was a thick, persistent fog. In those moments, all I craved was a small piece of normalcy, a momentary escape. I reached for my tablet on the rolling bedside table, my hand shaking with a tremor I'd grown accustomed to. My plan was simple: watch old home videos of my grandpa, George. I just needed to hear his voice. He was my anchor, my hero, the one person in the world who had always made me feel like I could do anything. His belief in me was the one thing cancer couldn't touch. Or so I thought. As I fumbled to open the video app, my finger slipped on the glass screen, a clumsy mistake from chemo-numbed fingertips. The app closed, and I found myself staring at my home screen. A single email notification from my bank glowed with an unnerving brightness. Normally, I would have ignored it. What was there to see? The trust fund my grandpa had left me was for medical school, for a future that now seemed like a distant, hazy dream. But the subject line made my tired eyes snap into focus. Large transaction processed. Large. The word didn't compute. I wasn't buying anything. My daily uniform was a paper-thin hospital gown. My biggest expense was the vending machine down the hall. A slow, heavy drumbeat started against my ribs, a nervous rhythm that had nothing to do with my medical condition. With a sense of dread, I tapped the notification. The banking app loaded with agonizing slowness, and then the numbers appeared, stark and unforgiving on the screen. A transfer, a massive one, a wire transfer for $60,000, sent from my trust account to an account I didn't recognize. But I did recognize the name listed as the beneficiary. Ryan Mitchell. My brother. My golden boy, irresponsible, never worked a day in his life brother. The air in my lungs turned to ice. It had to be a mistake. It had to be a security breach, a hacker. My parents, Robert and Mary Mitchell, were the trustees. They held the keys to my future. They would never, they couldn't, they loved me, didn't they? Just as that desperate thought crossed my mind, my phone buzzed on the bedside table. A text message. From my mom. I picked it up, my thumb hovering over the green icon, my heart pounding in my throat. I opened it. It read, "Thinking of you, sweetie. Mom and Dad are praying for you every single minute. You're our whole world." I read the words again and again. Our whole world. Then I looked back at the tablet screen, at the $60,000 hole where a piece of my future used to be. A cold, terrifying clarity cut through the chemo fog like a shard of glass. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a hacker. This was a betrayal of unimaginable proportions. And as I sat there, shivering in the cold, artificial glow of the two screens, a single horrifying thought solidified in my mind. This was only the beginning. They were just getting started. My grandfather, George Mitchell, was a man built of calloused hands, quiet integrity, and unwavering principles. He ran a small but respected construction business, and he smelled of sawdust and hard work. He wasn't a man for fancy words or flowery speeches, but when he spoke, you listened, because you knew his words were built on a foundation of truth. I spent my summers with him as a kid, and I remember sitting on the porch of his small, tidy house in upstate New York, the air thick with the smell of freshly cut grass. The summer I turned 16 was when he told me about the trust. He just finished telling me a story about his own father, a man who worked himself into an early grave in a coal mine, never having a chance to dream beyond the next paycheck. James, he'd said, his voice raspy but impossibly kind, as he handed me a cold bottle of root beer. I'm not going to be around forever. That's just a fact of life. But I want to make damn sure you have the chances I never did. The chances my own father couldn't even imagine. He leaned forward, his gaze so intense it felt like he was looking right into my soul. You have a good head on your shoulders and a good heart in your chest. That's a rare combination. You're going to be a doctor and you're going to do great things. You're going to help a lot of people. He explained that he'd set something aside for me. It's not just money, son, he'd emphasized, tapping his temple with a thick finger. It's a belief. My belief in you is a tool. You use it to build your future. Don't ever let anyone take that from you. Your legacy isn't what you're given. It's what you build with it. That trust fund was his legacy. It was his faith in me made tangible. It was the promise of a future where I could honor his memory by healing others. Now, that promise was being systematically broken transaction by transaction by the very people who were supposed to be its guardians. My own parents. Before the diagnosis, everything was normal, or what I thought was normal. After I got sick, in those first few weeks, they were the perfect picture of concerned, loving parents. They brought balloons that deflated in the stuffy hospital air. They sat by my bedside, holding my hand, their faces etched with practiced worry. My mom, Mary, would stroke my hair and tell me everything would be okay, her voice a soothing balm. My dad, Robert, a man who always hid his emotions behind a stoic, impenetrable mask, would just nod grimly and say, "You're a Mitchell. You're a fighter." But the fighter in me was getting tired, and their performance started to wear thin. Their visits became shorter, more perfunctory. The flowers stopped. The hand-holding became brief, awkward pats on the shoulder. They started complaining about the hospital itself. "It's just so draining, James," my mom said one afternoon, her voice a fragile whisper that carried an undertone of complaint. She was standing by the door, her purse already on her shoulder, eager to leave. "Seeing you like this, it just takes such a toll on our spirits. We need to protect our own energy, you know?" My brother, Ryan, was even worse. He was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in their eyes. He was handsome, effortlessly charming to outsiders, and had skated through life on my parents' dime and my father's reputation. He dropped out of college twice, leaving my dad to foot the bill for thousands in non-refundable tuition, and had a nasty habit of finding trouble, usually involving high-stakes poker games that my dad always ended up bailing him out of. When he visited me, it felt like a command performance. He'd slouch in the vinyl visitor's chair, his face buried in his phone, a perpetual smirk on his lips. One day, he came with my parents. While they were talking to a nurse in the hallway, he looked over at me, the smirk widening. "You know," he said, not bothering to lower his voice, "this whole fighting spirit thing is getting a little old. It would be a whole lot easier for everyone if you just, got this over with. This whole thing is a real drag on the family finances, not to mention everyone's mood." I didn't have the strength to respond. I just lay there, the chemo-induced nausea churning in my stomach like a cement mixer, and watched him. He wasn't my brother. He was a stranger, a vulture dressed in designer clothes, waiting for me to die so he could pick over the scraps. A few weeks before they shipped me home, I remember needing to do something drastic. My hair was falling out in clumps, leaving pathetic, thinning patches all over my head. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw a dying man. I couldn't stand it. I decided to take control of the one thing I could. I found a small, old-school barbershop a few blocks from the hospital and walked in. An old barber named Frank, with a kind face and gentle hands, was the only one there. "Just take it all off," I told him, my voice quiet. He didn't ask any questions. He just nodded, draped a cloth over me, and started his work. As the electric razor hummed and my thinning hair fell to the floor, I stared at my reflection. With each pass of the razor, I felt like I was shedding a layer of sickness, of victimhood. When he was done, my head was smooth. I looked different. I looked stark, raw, but I also looked like a fighter. "There you go, son," Frank said. brushing the last stray hairs off my neck. A fresh start. He wouldn't even let me pay him. That small act of kindness from a complete stranger was a stark, painful contrast to what was coming from my own family. The final betrayal, the one that set the whole nightmare in motion, came a week after that. My parents sat me down in my hospital room, their expressions a carefully rehearsed blend of sympathy and firm resolve. "James," my dad started, his eyes fixed on a spot on the wall just over my shoulder. "Your mother and we've been talking, and we've decided we need to take a step back. For our own mental health. This has been incredibly hard on us. We're going on a spiritual retreat, to recharge and find our center. But we found someone wonderful to help you," my mom added quickly, her smile so bright it was blinding. "A full-time home health aide. His name is Marcus. He has amazing references. He'll take great care of you, so you won't have to worry about a thing." They were abandoning me. There was no other word for it. They were outsourcing my care, washing their hands of their dying son, so they could go on a spiritual retreat, which I would later learn was a cover for a trip to scout out their new life, with their healthy, favored son. They framed it as an act of self-care, but I knew what it was. It was abandonment, pure and simple. That's when I truly met Nurse Jenny. She wasn't my primary nurse, but she often took shifts on my floor. She was older, in her 50s, with kind eyes that seemed to see more than most people wanted them to. She noticed the way my family's visits grew shorter and more forced. She saw the way my shoulders slumped after they left. She didn't pry. She'd just bring me an extra blanket or a cup of ginger tea for the nausea, and sit with me for a few minutes in a comfortable silence that was more healing than any words. The day after my parents' grand announcement, she came into my room to check my vitals. I was just staring at the wall, feeling hollowed out, erased. She finished her work, efficiently and gently, and then instead of leaving, she pulled the visitor's chair closer to my bed. "It's okay not to be okay, you know," she said softly. That was all it took. The dam broke. Tears I didn't even know were there started to well up in my eyes, hot and shameful. I told her everything. About Ryan's cruel words. About the spiritual retreat. About the gut-wrenching loneliness that was almost worse than the cancer itself. She listened without interrupting, her expression never changing from one of calm empathy. When I was done, my voice hoarse, she put a hand on my arm. Her touch was firm, steady. "You fight this thing in here," she said, nodding at the 4-bag dripping its poison into my veins. "That's a war and you're winning it. But there's another war you have to fight, and that's for you. For who you are. Don't let them take that from you, James. Don't let them silence you." Her words echoed my grandfather's. "Don't ever let anyone take that from you." That night, they moved me home. My own house felt foreign and cold, filled with the ghosts of a happy family that I now realized had never really existed. The next day, Marcus arrived. He was a tall, quiet man in his 40s, with a calm, professional demeanor that was instantly reassuring. He didn't fuss or offer platitudes. He just did his job and did it well. My parents and Ryan left that afternoon. They gave me quick, awkward hugs that felt like touching mannequins. "We'll call you every day," my mom chirped, her eyes already looking past me towards the door. Ryan just grunted and followed them, eager to get away. The door closed, and the silence they left behind was deafening. Alone in my room, with only the hum of the oxygen machine for company, I knew I had to do something. My conversation with Jenny had lit a small, defiant spark in the ashes of my despair. I grabbed my laptop. My hands were trembling, but my purpose was clear. I logged into my bank account, the one I hadn't dared to look at since that first, shocking discovery. My breath caught in my throat. My world tilted on its axis. It wasn't just the $60,000. There had been 2 more transfers since then. One for $110,000. And another just the day before for a staggering $176,200. Total withdrawn, $346,200. The entire fund. Every last penny of my grandfather's faith in me was gone. They had drained it dry. They had left me with nothing, assuming I'd be too sick to notice or too close to death for it to matter. I sat there, the screen glowing in the dark room, and a strange, terrifying calm settled over me. The grief was still there, a cold, hard stone in my chest. But something else was rising alongside it. A burning, icy rage that sharpened my senses and cleared the chemo fog from my brain. They hadn't just stolen my money. They were trying to erase me, to wipe my future off the map. They thought I was already dead. They were about to find out how wrong they were. In the quiet of my lonely house, I made a vow. I would not let my story end this way. I would not be a sad, pathetic footnote in their triumphant story of success. I would get justice. For me, and for my grandpa. My fingers found the contact list on my phone, scrolling past Mom and Dad with a fresh wave of disgust. I stopped at a name I hadn't called in years, a name my grandfather had told me to remember if I was ever in real, grown-up trouble. Harold Benson, attorney at law, my grandfather's oldest and dearest friend. I pressed the call button. The ringing felt like a countdown to a new kind of war. When a deep, familiar voice answered on the second ring, "Benson here." I took a shaky breath, the first breath of my new life. "Mr. Benson," I said, my voice cracking with an emotion I couldn't hide. "This is James, George Mitchell's grandson. I'm in real trouble." Harold Benson's voice on the other end of the line was a lifeline thrown into a churning sea. It was deep, gravelly, and carried the unmistakable weight of decades of authority. I'd met him a few times as a kid at my grandfather's annual 4th of July barbecues. He was a mountain of a man who seemed to fill every room he entered, always with a booming laugh, a firm handshake, and a Werther's original candy for me, which he'd produce from his jacket pocket like a magic trick. Hearing his voice now, I felt a sliver of hope cut through the thick fog of despair. "James? George's grandson? Well, I'll be damned. Son, it's good to hear your voice, but you sound like hell. What's going on?" I didn't hesitate. I poured it all out, the words tumbling over each other in a frantic, desperate rush. The cancer diagnosis, the brutal chemo, my parents' sudden spiritual retreat, the hiring of the home health aide, and finally, the gut-wrenching discovery of the empty trust fund. The silence on the other end of the line was so profound, so absolute, that for a second I thought the call had dropped. When he finally spoke, the familiar warmth was gone, replaced by a cold, hard fury that seemed to travel through the phone and raise the hairs on my arms. "They did what?" he growled, the two words laced with disbelief and contempt. "That fund was sacred, James. It wasn't just some bank account. It was George's legacy. It was his last promise to you. For them to spit on his grave like this, it's despicable. It's monstrous." He took a deep, audible breath, and I could picture him in his leather office chair, staring out at the city, his jaw tight. "Okay, son, listen to me, and listen carefully. From this moment on, your only job is to focus on getting better. That is your one and only mission. You let me handle the rest. You understand? This isn't just about money anymore. This is about honor. We're going to fix this." The conviction in his voice was a steel beam. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I wasn't fighting alone. I felt like I had a general on my side. "What do I do, Mr. Benson?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, hoarse from the emotion. "First, you call me Harry. We're past the formalities. Second, you don't say a single word to anyone. Not your parents, not your brother. If they call, you are sick, you are tired, you are confused. You are too weak to think about finances. Let them believe they are the smartest people in the room. Pride comes before the fall, James. And we're going to let them get very, very proud. Standing on a ledge so high the fall will be catastrophic." He was right. My first, raw instinct had been to scream at them, to call my mother and unleash all my pain and rage. But Harry's plan was better. It was colder. It was strategic. It was a game of chess, not a bar fight. He continued, his voice shifting from furious to methodical as he laid out the first steps. "I have the original trust documents in my firm's vault. George and I went over them with a fine-tooth comb. I'm going to review them tonight." George was a smart man, I'm willing to bet he put some ironclad protections in there, traps for greedy hands. In the meantime, I'm going to make 2 calls first thing in the morning. We need a team, a very specific kind of team. That's how I met Sarah Chun and Diane Foster. Harry, true to his word, arranged a video conference call the very next day. I joined from my laptop, propped up on my bedside table with a stack of books. I made sure the camera angle was tight on my face, highlighting my pale skin and the dark circles under my eyes. I needed to look the part of the fading victim. Sarah Chun appeared on the screen first. She was a forensic accountant in her late 30s, with sharp, intelligent eyes behind stylish glasses and a no-nonsense demeanor. She didn't offer sympathy. She offered competence, which was exactly what I needed. "Mr. Mitchell," she began, her voice crisp and clear. "My job is to follow the money. People like your family think that once money is wired, it vanishes into the ether. They're wrong. It always leaves a trail, like footprints in the snow. My job is to find those footprints and map out exactly where they lead. We'll trace every penny, what it was used for, who benefited, and how they tried to hide it. A digital paper trail is harder to erase than they think." Then Diane Foster's video feed flickered on. She looked to be in her 50s, with short-cropped gray hair and a gaze that felt like it could see through walls. She introduced herself as a former police detective turned private investigator and security consultant. "My team can have your house wired in 12 hours, she said, her voice flat and professional, without a hint of bravado. "Audio and video. We'll put microcameras in places they'd never think to look. Smoke detectors, power outlets, the back of the TV. You'll have a live feed on a secure, encrypted server, accessible only to you and Harry. If they're talking, we'll hear it. If they're planning, we'll see it." Harry then asked the crucial question. "That home health aide, Marcus, what's your read on him, James?" "He's quiet, professional," I said. "He seems like a decent guy. He doesn't treat me like I'm fragile." "Good guys can be our best assets," Harry said, a thoughtful tone in his voice. "Feel him out, cautiously. Don't reveal anything about us, but maybe share a little of your frustration. See where his loyalties lie. A man on the inside would be an absolute game changer." That afternoon, Marcus was helping me with my lunch, a bland chicken broth that I could barely stomach. He worked in a comfortable, easy silence, never pushing me to eat more than I could handle. He just made sure I was hydrated and comfortable. "Must be tough," he said suddenly, his back to me as he looked out the window. His voice was casual, but it felt intentional. "What's that?" I asked, my own voice quiet. "This," he said, gesturing vaguely around the room that had become my whole world. The whole situation. Being alone when you're going through something like this. It was an opening, a test. I decided to take a small, calculated risk. My parents think a spiritual retreat is more important than being here with their son, I said. The bitterness in my own voice surprised me with its intensity. Marcus stopped what he was doing and turned to look at me directly. There was a flicker of something in his eyes. Not pity, which I hated, but a deep, weary understanding. "My mom," he said, his voice low and steady. "Her sister, my aunt, did something similar when my grandmother got sick with Alzheimer's. Convinced her to sign over the house for safekeeping, to manage her finances. My aunt told everyone she was doing it out of love. By the time we figured it out, the house was sold, the money was gone, and my grandmother was in a state-run facility with nothing. Family can be the worst kind of thieves because they don't just steal your money. They steal your trust, too." The air in the room crackled with unspoken understanding. He got it. He had lived a version of this nightmare. I knew in that moment that Harry was right. Marcus wasn't just a home health aide. He was an ally. A quiet, steady, and perfectly placed ally. I told Harry about the conversation that night. I could almost hear him smile through the phone. "Excellent," he said, a note of deep satisfaction in his voice. "We have our inside man. Now the real game begins. Diane's team is going in tomorrow while you're at your oncology appointment. When you get back, your house will have eyes and ears everywhere." The next few days were a blur of quiet, clandestine activity. Diane's team was as good as she'd promised. They were ghosts. I left for my appointment with Dr. Winters, a long, draining session, and came back to a house that looked exactly the same, but felt completely different. That evening, I logged into the secure server Diane had set up. With a click, my laptop screen split into 6 different high-definition camera angles. The living room, the kitchen, the hallway, my dad's home office. It was surreal. I was a ghost in my own home watching the stage being set. Sarah Chun started her work, too, and it was breathtaking. She sent me encrypted emails with her findings, laying out the ugly truth in neat, irrefutable columns. The money hadn't just been transferred to Ryan. He had immediately moved it into a newly opened corporate account for a shell company named R&M Holdings. The directors listed on the incorporation documents: Ryan Mitchell and my mother, Mary Mitchell. My father's name was conspicuously absent from the official paperwork, a transparent and cowardly attempt to give him plausible deniability. "They're getting sloppy," Sarah wrote in one of her reports. "They think creating a corporation makes them look legitimate, but all it does is create a clearer paper trail of intent. They're leaving tracks a mile wide." The first real break, the first piece of damning evidence from our own surveillance, came from Marcus. He'd overheard a phone call my father had taken in the garden, thinking he was alone. My father was talking to Ryan. "The house is almost ready," my dad had said, his voice low but excited. "The down payment cleared without a hitch. Just be patient, son. Once things are settled, we can finalize everything and move in. A new start for us. A house. They were buying a house with my future. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of it stole my breath. I relayed the information to Harry immediately. He was silent for a long moment, processing. "A house," he finally said. "A large, immovable, tangible asset. That's good for us, James. Very, very good." Then he said something that would become our mantra for the difficult weeks to come. "I know this is hard. I know watching this unfold is like torture. But I want you to let them build that house. Let them furnish it. Let them throw a goddamn housewarming party. We're not just going to take back your money. We're going to let them build their entire dream on a foundation of lies, and then we are going to pull it all down around them in one single glorious move." A cold, hard smile touched my lips for the first time in months. My parents and my brother thought they were building a new life. They had no idea they were just building me the perfect stage for their own destruction. The storm was no longer just beginning. It was gathering a terrifying, beautiful strength, ready to unleash a fury they couldn't possibly imagine. The days that followed were the hardest, most draining of my life. I wasn't just fighting cancer anymore. I was engaged in a silent, high-stakes war of espionage from my own bed. I had to become the best actor in the world, and my one-man show was titled The Dying Sun. Every phone call with my parents was a carefully orchestrated performance. I'd let my voice tremble with weakness. I'd inject long, weary pauses. I'd pretend to be confused, my memory supposedly foggy from the treatments. "Oh, hi, Mom," I'd say, my voice a practiced, raspy whisper. "Sorry, I must have been sleeping. The days they all sort of blend together now." "That's okay, sweetie," she'd chirp, her voice dripping with a false sympathy that made my stomach turn. "You just rest up. That's the most important thing. We're thinking of you." I could almost hear the unspoken relief in her voice that I wasn't asking any difficult questions, that I was fading away just as they'd hoped. Marcus became my unofficial director and coach. He was a master of quiet observation. "They called while you were napping," he'd tell me when I woke up. "I told them you had a rough night, that you were disoriented." They sounded very understanding, almost pleased. Pleased. The word echoed in my head. They were pleased that I was losing my grip. It made their theft cleaner, simpler. It absolved them of their guilt. The real test, the moment our whole operation nearly blew up in our faces, came about 2 weeks in. I was in the kitchen, slowly pouring myself a glass of water, my hand shaking, when my cell phone rang. The screen read, "Dad." My heart leaped into my throat. I answered, putting on my sick voice. "Hey, Dad." "James," he said, His voice was different. The usual detached warmth was gone, replaced by a hard, nervous edge. I just got a strange call. From a Mr. Henderson at the bank. My blood ran cold. My grip on the glass tightened. Mr. Henderson was the branch manager Sarah had been cautiously trying to get information from, the one who'd been stonewalling her because my parents were the legal trustees. He said someone has been making inquiries about the trust. My dad continued, his voice low and suspicious, each word a carefully placed probe. A third party. He wouldn't say who, of course, client confidentiality and all that. Said it was a legal firm. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you, son? My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I was sure he could hear it through the phone. This was it. The moment our entire plan could unravel with a single wrong word. I took a deep, shaky breath, picturing my grandfather's steady gaze, his words about staying strong. I let out a weak, raspy cough, a genuine one this time, brought on by sheer panic. The bank? I asked, my voice small and thin. Dad, I don't know. I can barely keep track of what day it is. Why would a law firm be asking about the trust? I infused my voice with fear, with the confusion of a sick young man who feels the world is spinning out of his control. Is something wrong with the money? There was a long, agonizing pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the faint sound of his breathing. He was weighing my performance, searching for any hint of deception. I held my breath. No, he finally said, his tone softening, the suspicion receding. I'm sure it's nothing. Probably just a routine audit or something from the main office. Bureaucratic nonsense. Don't you worry your head about it. You just focus on resting up. Okay, Dad, I whispered, and quickly hung up before my voice could betray me. I leaned heavily against the counter, my legs shaking so badly I thought they might give out. I passed the test, but it was a terrifying reminder of how precarious our situation was. They were nervous. The beast had been startled. That night, I watched them on the live feed from the camera in my dad's office. They were huddled together, my father, my mother, and Ryan, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. The microphone was sensitive enough to pick up every damning word. He's getting suspicious, Robert, my mother hissed, twisting a pearl necklace at her throat. That call from Henderson. That is not a coincidence. What if he's spoken to someone? Mary, calm down, my dad said, though he was pacing the floor like a caged animal. You heard him. He's completely out of it. He has no idea what's going on. It was probably just some bank bureaucracy like you said before. Then Ryan, my entitled, arrogant brother, chimed in with the chilling callousness that was his trademark. Who cares if he is suspicious? Seriously, what's he going to do about it? Call the cops from his deathbed? By the time anyone even listens to him, it'll be too late. We're in the clear. Later that night, Diane's surveillance system flagged a new activity. Ryan, brimming with a confidence born of pure stupidity, was using the house Wi-Fi on his brand new laptop. A laptop I had no doubt was purchased with my money. He wasn't searching for cars or vacations. He was searching for legal terms. I watched, mesmerized, as the keystroke logger captured his frantic queries. Statute of limitations for trust fund fraud. Challenging a trustee's authority in court. How to liquidate assets quickly and move them offshore. He was a fool. Paranoid, sloppy fool. He was creating his own evidence trail, a detailed digital confession, and feeding it directly to our team. Each search was another nail in his own coffin. The family's paranoia, however, made them dangerous and unpredictable. The next afternoon, my mother showed up at the house unannounced. Marcus let her in, shooting me a quick, almost imperceptible nod of warning as he passed my open bedroom door. She swept into my room, a storm of expensive perfume and forced cheerfulness. James, honey, I was in the neighborhood getting my nails done, and I just had to pop in and see my baby boy. She fussed over my pillows, straightened my blankets, her eyes darting around the room, scanning every surface. She was looking for something. I didn't know what. A legal pad, a hidden phone, any sign of cognizance. But her search was frantic, masked by her doting mother act. "Mom, I'm really tired," I said, letting my eyelids droop, my head sinking deeper into the pillow. "I know, sweetie, I know. I won't stay long." She sat on the edge of my bed and took my hand. Her skin was cold and dry. "I just worry about you so much. You know, your father and I have been doing a lot of research. This treatment you're getting here, it's good, standard. But we've heard about a wonderful cutting-edge clinic in Switzerland. It's very advanced, very exclusive. We think it could be the miracle you need." My mind went into overdrive. Switzerland. Clinic. It was a lie, a beautifully constructed lie, and I knew instantly what it was for. It was their cover story. It was the grand, noble excuse they were going to use to explain where all the money went. They weren't just thieves. They were aspiring screenwriters, and this was their plot twist. I had to fight every single instinct to laugh in her face, to call her out on her pathetic, transparent scheme. Instead, I just looked at her with wide, tired eyes, playing the part she had cast for me. "Switzerland?" I asked weakly, my voice full of manufactured hope. That must be incredibly expensive." Her face lit up with triumph. She thought I had taken the bait, hook, line, and sinker. "Oh, James, don't you worry your pretty head about a thing," she said, squeezing my hand with theatrical emotion. "We will take care of everything. We would spare no expense to save you. None at all. You're worth more than all the money in the world to us." She left a few minutes later, humming to herself, convinced she had successfully planted the seed for their grand deception. She had no idea she had just handed me the final, crucial piece of their fraudulent puzzle. That night, Marcus confirmed it. While cleaning the kitchen, he'd found a file folder she had accidentally left on the counter. A classic, "I'm so flustered I forgot this" move. He waited until the house was quiet, took a picture of the contents with his phone, and sent the images to me. It was a glossy brochure for a real clinic in Zurich. And tucked inside was a freshly printed document. A letter drafted on what looked like official clinic letterhead, detailing a proposed experimental cellular therapy, with an estimated cost that, by sheer magical coincidence, was just over $350,000. It was their masterpiece. It was also a forgery, a clumsy one at that. I forwarded the images to Harry and Sarah. Within an hour, they had confirmed it. The clinic was real, but the letterhead was a poor copy downloaded from the internet. The doctor's name they'd used was misspelled, and the therapy they described didn't even exist. It was their smoking gun. The why behind the theft. The proof of premeditated fraud so blatant it was almost insulting. They thought it was their perfect alibi. In reality, it was their written confession, signed, sealed, and ready to be delivered to a judge. The eye of the storm was passing. I could hear the wind begin to howl, and I knew it was howling for them. The day of the housewarming party was a perfect, sun-drenched Saturday in late September. The kind of glorious autumn day that feels full of promise and new beginnings. For my family, it was the promise of their new life. A life built with the bricks and mortar of my stolen future. For me, it was the promise of a justice so cold and complete it would shatter their world into a million pieces. I didn't go to the party. My physical presence wasn't needed for this part of the plan. In fact, my absence was a critical part of the narrative they had constructed for themselves. The tragic, dying son, too sick to join the celebration. Instead, I sat propped up in my bed, the windows open to let in the fresh, clean air, and watched the entire sordid affair unfold on my laptop screen. The feed from the hidden camera nestled in the smoke detector in their new living room was crystal clear, the audio sharp enough to pick up the clinking of champagne glasses. Their new house was a cathedral of bad taste. A sprawling, 5-bedroom McMansion in a gated community, filled with oversized, ostentatious leather furniture and gaudy crystal chandeliers that looked like they belonged in a Las Vegas casino. My parents were glowing. They moved through the crowd with the practiced ease of royalty, accepting congratulations and basking in the envious stares of their friends. My father, Robert, stood by the massive floor-to-ceiling stone fireplace, a glass of expensive single-malt scotch in his hand, looking every bit the proud, successful patriarch. My mother, Mary, was a social butterfly, her tinkling laughter echoing through the cavernous, high-ceilinged room. And my brother, Ryan, was holding court by the sparkling new swimming pool, his latest girlfriend, a blonde named Melissa, hanging off his arm. They were both drunk on stolen success. They were celebrating my death. Not just my eventual physical death, which they were clearly banking on, but the death of my future, my ambitions, my legacy. They were dancing on my grave, and they hadn't even had the decency to bury me first. I watched for an hour as the guests, a who's who of their country club set and my father's business associates, milled around, sipping wine and murmuring their approval. The scene was perfectly set. The lambs were all in the pen. At exactly 7 p.m., just as the sun was setting and casting long, dramatic shadows across the manicured lawn, the doorbell rang. It wasn't me, showing up for a dramatic, tearful confrontation. It was something far more terrifying. It was the real world coming to call. I saw my father, his face flush with success, open the massive, ornate front door, a welcoming smile plastered on his face. The smile froze, then slowly melted away, replaced by a look of utter confusion. Standing on his brand-new marble porch was Harry Benson. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored dark suit that seemed to absorb the light around him, his expression as hard and unyielding as granite. But he wasn't alone. Flanking him on either side were two uniformed sheriff's deputies, their hands resting calmly on their belts. And standing just behind them was a pale, tired-looking man in a rumpled suit, holding a worn leather briefcase. "Robert," Harry said. His voice was calm, conversational, but it sliced through the party chatter like a surgeon's scalpel. "We need to have a word." My father paled, his face turning a pasty, unhealthy gray. "Harry? What is this? This is a private party. This is my home." "Not anymore," Harry said, stepping past him into the foyer without waiting for an invitation. The deputies followed, their solid, imposing presence sucking all the air out of the room. The soft jazz music faltered and died. Conversations sputtered into silence. Every single head in the room turned to look. My mother, sensing the shift in atmosphere, hurried over from across the room, her face a mask of confused indignation. "Harry, what on earth is the meaning of this? You are interrupting our celebration." Harry ignored her completely. His eyes were fixed on my father. "Robert Mitchell," he said, his voice now ringing with the cold, clear authority of the law. "This gentleman is Mr. Davies. He is a court-appointed receiver. And these deputies are here to serve you with a temporary restraining order and a legal notice of asset seizure." The receiver, Mr. Davies, stepped forward and handed my father a thick stack of papers. My father stared down at them as if they were a venomous snake, his hand trembling too much to take them at first. "Asset seizure?" he stammered, the words catching in his throat. "What are you talking about? This is insane. I'm talking about the $346,200 you and your wife, Mary, illegally transferred from James Mitchell's medical trust fund," Harry announced. His voice wasn't a shout, but it was pitched to carry to every corner of the silent, watching room. A collective, audible gasp rippled through the guests. "The money you used to make the down payment on this very house. The money you used to furnish it. The money that paid for this party." My mother let out a small, theatrical cry, clutching her pearls. "That's a slanderous lie. That money was for his treatment. We were sending him to a special clinic in Switzerland. We have the documents to prove it." "Ah, yes," Harry said, a grim, humorless smile touching his lips. He reached into his own briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a copy of their forged document, the supposed letter from the clinic. "You mean this fraudulent letter? The one with the misspelled doctor's name and the fake letterhead you downloaded from the internet? The one you were planning to use to cover your tracks after James had passed away? We have 3 separate forensic document experts who will testify in court that this is a complete and utter fabrication." He let that final, damning statement hang in the air. The silence was deafening. As of this moment, by order of the court, this house, the cars you bought last week, the new bank accounts you opened, every single asset purchased with the stolen funds is frozen. Mr. Davies is now in legal control of this property. The party, he finished, his eyes sweeping over the stunned crowd, is over. The spell was broken. The guests, who moments before had been slapping my father on the back, now looked at him and my mother as if they were carriers of a deadly plague. They began to move, not towards my parents to offer support, but away from them, creating a visible, ever-widening circle of isolation. They averted their eyes, whispering amongst themselves as they scurried for the door, abandoning the sinking ship with a speed that was almost comical. Just then, Ryan came rushing in from the patio, his face flushed with champagne and righteous anger. What the hell is going on? Who the hell are you people? You can't just barge in here. One of the deputies, a large, impassive man, simply put up a hand and stepped in front of him. Sir, I'm going to need you to calm down and stay right here. Ryan looked from the deputy's implacable face to Harry, to his parents' ashen, horrified expressions. The reality of the situation, the full, catastrophic weight of it, finally crashed down on him. The color drained from his face. James, he whispered, the name a curse on his lips. He told you. Harry looked at my brother with a level of contempt I had never seen before. He didn't have to tell me much, he said coldly. You did most of the work for us. Your late-night internet search history was particularly illuminating. The final scene I watched on my laptop was of my family, my former family, standing alone and utterly defeated in the middle of their grand, empty living room. The party food was untouched. The champagne was going flat. Mr. Davies, the receiver, was calmly talking on his phone, arranging for a locksmith to come and change the locks immediately. My father had sunk into one of the oversized leather armchairs, his head in his hands, a broken man. My mother was weeping, not the soft, manipulative tears I knew so well, but harsh, ugly sobs of rage and humiliation. And Ryan just stood there, looking at the life he thought he had so cleverly stolen, as it was legally and systematically dismantled right before his very eyes. Their dream had become a nightmare, and it was all perfectly, beautifully, and satisfyingly legal. I slowly, deliberately, closed my laptop. I didn't feel the rush of triumphant joy I had expected. I didn't feel glee. I felt a profound, quiet, and deeply satisfying sense of order being restored to the universe. The storm had finally hit, and it had washed away all the lies, leaving only the cold, hard truth in its wake. The days following the disastrous housewarming party were a quiet demolition. The storm had passed, leaving behind the wreckage. There was no more drama, no more shouting matches, no more elaborate schemes. There was only the cold, efficient, and remorseless machinery of the law, grinding my family's stolen dreams into a fine gray dust. Harry sent me daily updates, not with relish, but with a professional sense of duty. I saw photos of moving trucks, hired by the receiver, Mr. Davies, parked outside the McMansion, being loaded with the ostentatious furniture and unopened boxes. I saw copies of court filings and legal notices, each document another nail in their financial coffin. The public humiliation was absolute and swift. News travels at the speed of light in those kinds of tight-knit, gossipy communities. The story of Robert and Mary Mitchell, the respectable couple who stole from their cancer-stricken son to buy a mansion, became a cautionary tale whispered at the country club, over bridge games, and in the checkout line at the gourmet market. Friends they had known for decades suddenly stopped answering their calls. My father's business associates, who had been so eager to toast his success, now crossed the street to avoid him. The delicate social world they had worked so hard to build, a world based on the appearance of wealth and propriety, crumbled overnight. They were pariahs. I saw a small news item online from a local business journal, announcing my father had stepped down from his position on the board of a local charity. I knew he hadn't stepped down. He had been pushed. About a week after the party, Harry called me. His voice was calm, professional. "They're ready to surrender completely," he said. "Their lawyer contacted me this morning. They've agreed to sign a full and final settlement. They'll return every last cent, sign over any remaining assets purchased with the funds, which includes the 2 new cars they bought, and, of course, relinquish their roles as trustees, effective immediately. In exchange, he paused, you agree not to press for criminal charges. A hot flare of anger shot through me. Why would I agree to that? I asked, my voice tight. After everything they did? They deserve to be charged. They deserve to go to jail. They do, Harry said gently, and I could hear the empathy in his voice. And if you want to go down that road, I will be right there with you and we will win. But, James, I want you to think about what that means for you. A criminal trial would be long, messy, and brutally public. It would force you to relive every painful detail on a witness stand, under the cross-examination of a defense attorney whose only job is to discredit you, to paint you as confused or vindictive. It would take years of your life. This way, it's clean. It's final. You get everything back. You get your freedom from them, and you get to move on with your life. Sometimes the best victory isn't about getting the maximum punishment for them. It's about getting the maximum peace for you. He was right. As much as my anger screamed for retribution, a deeper part of me, a part that was just so incredibly tired of fighting, screamed for peace. I was tired of the anger. I was tired of the hate. I wanted to focus on healing, on the future my grandfather had so desperately wanted for me. I wanted to live. Okay, Harry, I said, the words feeling heavy but right. Let's do it. The final meeting, the signing of the documents, was held in Harry's large, intimidating conference room on the 40th floor of a downtown skyscraper. The room was all glass and dark mahogany, with a sprawling view of the city skyline. I was there first, with Harry by my side. I was still pale, still thin from the ongoing treatments, but as I looked at my reflection in the dark glass of the window, I saw a flicker of the person I used to be. For the first time, I felt strong. I was in control of my own story again. They walked in, and the change in them was shocking. They looked diminished, defeated. My father's expensive suit, once a symbol of his authority, now hung loosely on his frame. His shoulders were slumped, his face gray with the pallor of defeat. My mother's eyes were red-rimmed and puffy, her usually impeccable makeup hastily and unevenly applied. And Ryan looked like a cornered, feral animal, his eyes darting around the room, filled with a sullen, impotent rage. He was radiating hatred. They sat down opposite us. A weary-looking lawyer I didn't recognize, a man who clearly wished he were anywhere else on earth, sat with them. The settlement documents were already laid out on the gleaming table, a thick stack of paper that represented the final, legal amputation of my family. For a long, agonizing time, no one spoke. The only sound was the rustle of paper as Harry's paralegal organized the signature pages. Finally, my mother broke the silence. Her voice was a broken, theatrical whisper. "James," she began, her eyes filling with tears. They were real tears this time, I think, but they weren't tears of remorse for what she had done to me. They were tears of pure self-pity for what had happened to her. "How could you do this to us? To your own family? After everything? We only ever wanted what was best." I looked at her, truly looked at her, and for the first time, I saw her not as my mother, but as a stranger. A manipulative, selfish woman whose love was so conditional, so transactional. It had vanished the very moment I became an inconvenience. "What was best?" I asked, my voice steady and clear, cutting through her performance. Was it best to abandon me when I was at my sickest? Was it best to steal the entire legacy my grandfather left for me? Was it best to build a new life for yourselves on the assumption that I was going to die? Tell me, what part of that was best for anyone but yourselves? My father flinched as if I'd physically struck him. He finally looked up, his eyes meeting mine for a brief, cowardly second before flicking away. "We made a mistake, son," he mumbled to the table. "A terrible mistake." "No, Dad," I said, shaking my head slowly. "A mistake is taking a wrong turn on the highway. What you did was a choice. A series of hundreds of choices, every single day. You chose Ryan over me. You chose a house over your son's future. You chose greed over family. Those weren't mistakes. That was you. That was who you really are without the masks. Ryan couldn't contain his poisonous rage any longer. He slammed his hand on the table, making the water glasses jump. You think you're so much better than us, don't you? He spat, his face contorted with a lifetime of jealousy. The saintly, sick little genius. You always were Grandpa's favorite. You always got everything you wanted. I never wanted anything but a family, I said quietly, the simple, devastating truth of it hanging in the air between us. And you took that from me, too. I picked up the heavy, expensive pen. I signed my name on the document that would legally and emotionally sever them from my life forever. The signature was firm, unwavering. I pushed the thick stack of papers across the polished table towards them. My father signed without another word, his hand trembling. Ryan snatched the pen and scrawled his name angrily, the ink bleeding on the page. My mother was the last one. Her hand shook so violently she could barely hold the pen. A single tear splashed onto the signature line just before she signed her name, sealing her own fate. It was done. I stood up. Harry stood with me. I looked one last time at the three people who had given me life and then tried to take my future. And in that moment, I felt nothing. The anger was gone. The sadness was gone. There was just a vast, quiet, empty space where a family used to be. Goodbye, I said to the room. And then I turned around and walked out of the conference room, out of their lives, and towards my own uncertain, but finally free future. I didn't look back. 18 months. It's a strange measurement of time. It's long enough for seasons to change twice over, for the world to keep spinning, but short enough that the memory of the storm is still fresh. In 18 months, cancer cells can be beaten into submission. Wounds, both the visible ones on the body and the invisible ones on the soul, can begin to scar over, turning from raw, open pains into pale, silvery lines of survival. A life, I discovered, can be rebuilt from the absolute ashes. The first 6 months after the settlement were the hardest. Finishing the final rounds of my chemotherapy regimen was a brutal, soul-crushing marathon. There were days I was so weak, so consumed by a bone-deep weariness and relentless nausea, that I could barely lift my head from the pillow. In those quiet, lonely moments, when the world was reduced to the four walls of my room, the ghost of my family's betrayal would sometimes creep back in, whispering its poison. But now, when it came, it was different. I wasn't alone anymore. Harry Benson, the legal titan, somehow transformed into the father I'd lost, checking in on me constantly, not just about legal matters, but about my life. He'd call just to ask if I'd eaten, or to tell me a terrible joke he'd heard. Nurse Jenny, who had long since insisted I drop the nurse and just call her Jenny, would stop by after her long shifts at the hospital, bringing containers of homemade soup and stories from the ward that made me laugh, reminding me that the world was bigger than my own pain. And Marcus, my stoic guardian, stayed on for a few months after the settlement, long after he was needed, simply because he had become a friend. He taught me how to play chess. Over the checkered board, in the quiet afternoons, we'd talk about everything and nothing. He taught me about strategy, about thinking 10 moves ahead, about the importance of protecting your king. He never said it out loud, but I knew we weren't just talking about chess. This strange, cobbled-together group of people became my family. Not a family of blood, but one of choice, which I was learning was infinitely stronger. And slowly, painstakingly, I got better. The fog in my brain began to lift. The strength, little by little, returned to my limbs. The day Dr. Winters, my oncologist, sat me down and told me my latest scans were clear, that my cancer was officially in remission, was surreal. I didn't cry with joy or shout with relief. I just felt a profound, bone-deep sense of peace, as if a weight I'd been carrying my entire life had finally been lifted. I had survived, in every sense of the word. With my health returning, I turned my focus back to my grandfather's dream. The dream they had tried to steal. I reapplied to medical school, my essays now imbued with a perspective on life and loss that few applicants could claim. My stolen funds, now fully recovered and sitting in a new, secure trust account managed by Harry, were waiting for me. I was accepted into one of the best programs in the country. The day I received my official acceptance letter, a thick, important-looking envelope, I didn't think to call my parents. The instinct was simply gone. Instead, I drove 3 hours upstate to the small, quiet cemetery where my grandfather was buried. The autumn air was crisp and clean, smelling of damp earth and distant wood smoke. I sat on the grass beside the simple granite headstone that read George Mitchell. A good man. I pulled the letter from my jacket pocket and read it aloud to him, my voice thick with emotion. "I did it, Grandpa," I whispered to the wind. "I'm going to be a doctor, just like you always said." It was more than just getting into school. It was about fulfilling the promise. It was about looking up at the sky and telling his memory that his faith in me had not been misplaced. It had been the anchor that held me steady through the storm. But I knew I had to do more. The money, now that I had it back, felt heavy, tainted by the greed that had surrounded it. Using it all just for myself felt wrong. So, with Harry's expert legal help, I did something else. We took a significant portion of the recovered funds and established the George Mitchell Legacy Scholarship, a perpetual fund dedicated to helping medical students from low-income families, students who had the brains and the heart, but not the resources. My grandfather's legacy wouldn't just be my future. It would be the future of dozens of other doctors who, like me, had a dream but lacked the means. It was the best way I could think of to truly honor him, to turn something so ugly into something beautiful. One evening, sorting through my email, I saw a name in my inbox that made my heart give a sudden, unpleasant jolt. Melissa, Ryan's ex-girlfriend. I almost deleted it without opening it. I didn't want any connection to that life. But a grim curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. The email was long and rambling, a pathetic mix of apology and self-preservation. She claimed she had no idea the money was stolen until the very end, that Ryan had told her it was an early inheritance. She wrote about how Ryan's life had completely spiraled after the settlement. He was working a dead-end, third-shift job at a warehouse to pay off the gambling debts he'd immediately accrued. My parents, she wrote, had sold their old house, the one I grew up in, the one filled with all my childhood memories, and were living in a small, rented condo in a different state, their social standing and their self-respect completely destroyed. But it was the attachment that caught my eye. It was an audio file. She wrote, "I recorded this a few weeks before the party. I was getting scared of him. I think you should hear it, for your own peace of mind." I hesitated, then clicked play. Ryan's voice, slurred with alcohol and arrogance, filled my headphones. He was bragging to Melissa. And the best part is, Mom and Dad are eating it up. It's so easy. All I had to do was keep telling them how much of a burden James is, how the medical bills were going to ruin them financially. Mom was easy. She always resented him for being Grandpa's perfect little favorite. Dad took more work, but he's so terrified of ending up poor. I just played on their deepest fears. It was like taking candy from a very stupid baby. Hearing it didn't bring a fresh wave of anger, as I'd expected. It just brought a sad, final clarity. It wasn't just spontaneous greed. It was a deep, poisonous, and long-festering jealousy that had driven my brother, and he had expertly and cruelly manipulated my parents' character flaws to get what he wanted. They were all guilty, but he had been the architect of their collective downfall, and now they were all living in the emotional and financial ruins he had created. I forwarded the email and the audio file to Harry with a short note. "For your records, should we ever need it." Then I deleted it from my computer and my life. It was a part of a past that no longer had any power over me. A week later, my phone rang. It was Dr. Winters, my oncologist. "James," he said, his voice warm and familiar. "Now that you're officially in remission and deferring med school for a year to get your strength back, I have a proposition for you. We're launching a new research project here at the hospital, focusing on the psychological recovery of patients post-chemotherapy. We need a research assistant, someone with a unique perspective, someone who's been through it." I thought of you. I stood there in my small apartment, speechless. A year ago, I was a patient in that very hospital, fighting for my life. Now, he was asking me to come back not as a patient but as a colleague, as a healer. I'd be honored, doctor, I said, and a real, genuine smile spread across my face. A new dawn was breaking, and this time I was ready to step into the light. Today, I walked through the familiar halls of the hospital, but everything was different. The air didn't smell of chemicals and antiseptic anymore. It smelled of coffee, floor wax, and something I could only describe as hope. I wore a crisp white lab coat instead of a flimsy, backless hospital gown. My ID badge, clipped to my pocket, didn't say patient. It said researcher, oncology department. My work here, assisting Dr. Winters, has become a vital bridge between my past and my future. I spend a lot of my days analyzing data, poring over studies, and helping to write grant proposals. But the most important part of my job, the part Dr. Winters knew I needed, is the time I spend on the wards. I talk to patients who are walking the same terrifying, lonely path I once did. I don't tell them my whole story. That's not what they need. They don't need to hear about stolen money and family betrayal. They just need to be seen. I listen to their fears. I talk to them about side effects, about the metallic taste that food has, about the exhaustion that feels like it's in your bones. I offer a quiet word of encouragement. I try to be for them what Nurse Jenny was for me. A small moment of real human connection in a sea of overwhelming medical procedure. I try to be a reminder that there is life on the other side of this. This afternoon, I was walking down the third-floor corridor when I saw a family huddled around a young woman's bedside. She couldn't have been much older than me. Her head was bare, just like mine had been. The father was holding her hand, his thumb stroking her knuckles. The mother was stroking her hair, what little was left of it. And her brother was sitting on the other side of the bed, reading to her from a fantasy novel, his voice a low, steady murmur. They were a fortress of love around her, shielding her from the storm. A pang of something, a ghost of a memory, a flicker of what might have been, tightened in my chest for a half-second. But it wasn't painful. It wasn't angry or sad. It was just an observation. It was a quiet reminder of what a family should be, and a peaceful acknowledgement of the calm I'd found in the absence of my own. I found myself smiling for them, for their love. I continued down the hall, my footsteps echoing softly on the polished linoleum. My grandfather was right all those years ago on that porch. A legacy isn't something that's given to you in a will. It's what you build day by day, choice by choice. My family tried to steal my inheritance, the money my grandfather left behind. But they could never touch his true legacy. The strength he instilled in me, the unwavering belief that I was worth fighting for. They thought my value was tied to a number in a bank account. They were wrong. My value was in my resilience. My worth was in my ability to heal, first myself, and now I hope to help others begin their own journey of healing. The greatest inheritance I received wasn't the trust fund. It was the second chance at life, a chance I fought for, a chance I clawed my way towards, a chance I earned. And I wasn't going to waste a single day of it. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. It's a strange and often difficult world, and I've learned that sometimes the deepest wounds come from the people we least expect, the ones who are supposed to protect us. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to fight for yourself against all odds, where you had to become your own hero? Share your story in the comments below. Your voice matters, and your experience could be the one thing someone else needs to hear today to feel less alone. And please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story. Take care of yourselves and each other.